Well, I've got my photo, so I know where that's going to go back. So I'm going to unscrew that screw. Take that screw out. And there you can see that shaft coming through the centre of that pinion. Now that's a D-shaped hole in that pinion. And taking note of that, I can notice that the flat of the D is on this side of the pinion, not that side. That's the round side over there. If I put that screw loosely back in there and give it a push, I'll push that pinion straight out the back, I'd say. Yep, just like that. Take the screw, there's our pinion. As I said, that's a D-shaped hole there, and the flat side is on this side, in my case. It wouldn't matter if it was 180 degrees out, just as long as you knew what the alignment of your one was. Now with the pinion out the way, what's the action of this like? Well, I haven't got the spring on there, of course, but I can tell you it's not good. It's quite sticky. Why is it sticky? Well, it's oily. There's an oily look to this, so it's had something on it in the way of oil or grease, possibly graphite grease, but it's gone sticky. It's dried out and gone sticky. I'll remove this screw here. This is the retainer for that spring. And this plain screw head here, where did that go? Oh, it's way over there. Because of this flash wire here, which you can see coming through the body, you can't lift this piece out completely. There's another plain screw at the top here. Let's get that off. We can lift this up and rotate it. Yeah, you can rotate it far enough to get in behind it. So all these surfaces here, they can all be cleaned. You can see there's a bit of grease and rubbish in here. All of that needs to come out, and likewise in the body here. Now that's definitely graphite powder. Someone's been spraying graphite powder around in there. Now graphite powder is a wonderful lubricant, but if you've got oil or anything like that there and you put graphite powder in there, basically it'll just clump up in there. You'll end up with an obstruction instead of a lubricant. This buffer here that the mirror comes up against, I'm just seeing if that's loose. If it is, I'll lift that off completely and glue it back later. If it is, I may even replace it with something else. And why I'd remove that is it's likely to get all dirty and scungy anyway. This is the adhesive from the back side of it. It really hasn't got much adhesive left on there. That piece was actually, I think that's fragmenting, it's delaminating. I may replace that with something else. Just trying to decide whether I should remove any more from here. I think I probably should. There are 3 screws here. They hold this piece in place, the focus mount part. So I'm going to remove those. I'm going to strip this down fairly completely. Because it's so greasy and sticky, that allows the focus mount part to come off the front. That's all quite greasy. This pinion here, that one's the shutter release. That doesn't come out, that's all staked in place. I'm going to lift this front piece off and clean that separately, I think. Because their leatherette patches are missing from here, I can get to the screws. I might just as well take this off and clean it. If the leatherette patches had been glued back there firmly, I wouldn't bother. There'd be no point. I'd just clean it in place. But it's usually easier to clean things when they're not in place. There's a single screw at the base here, little chrome plated screw. Frequently that's missing. Okay, so there's our chrome trim off the front. Our leatherette runs around the outside edge here. I want to see how loose that is. I can see it's loose in part. I don't know whether it's loose all the way around. It looks like it's just at this end that it's loose, so I'm going to leave that in place. I'll just glue it back at that point. If it was loose completely, I'd have it off because it's easier to clean things, particularly if you're planning on using solvents when there are no leatherettes present than when there are leatherettes present. Alright, start cleaning up some of this. I'll start with this chrome plate just because it's off. Now the stain here from the adhesives, if that comes off easily with the solvent, that's good. If it doesn't come off with the solvents, well, that means it's stuck really well. It's not going to cause a problem. I'll just clean this chrome trim up. And the underside is where it'll be trapping in dirt and dust and old grease and so forth. So I'll clean that up. Not because it needs to look pretty, but mostly because I don't need all that filth under there. Let's start on this piece. There shouldn't be too much here in the way of delicate things that you have to watch out for. A little bit of oil staining there, you can see that. That's not a bad example by any means. And I'll just clean around the whole front of this piece here. We've probably got the remains of some of our adhesive on the front here. This is where the leatherette comes back to. I'll see if that'll scrape off with the back of my scalpel blade. That's definitely the original adhesive there, because it's black and it's brittle. I think the black colour is probably the adhesive. It may just have taken the black back off the back of the leatherette. A bit of corrosion on this side. Not present on the other side, I noticed. Well, this was the side that the leatherette fragmented on. Just wipe that over with some solvent. Of course I've got that loose dust all over the part I just cleaned, so I'm going to have to go back and clean that. That's the front of the plate cleaned. Now at the back of the plate, we'll start with doing this outside part. Now cleaning this piece. Well, this bright alloy piece here, well of course that's the machined surface that this ring runs around on. And all these other black surfaces here, you can see they're quite greasy. I want all that off. I usually lubricate this piece with graphite powder. But you do that after you've got rid of all the oil and grease. And it's clean and dry. This pinion at the top here, I'm making sure that revolves freely, and it does. Life would be much easier if you could lift this ring out completely, but life isn't organised for my convenience. You've got to put up with what you find. In the back of this ring I want that all cleaned. Now that's, you can certainly see that's a bit oily and black. See, that's lifting that flash wire out of its socket there, out of its groove, to make sure that's pushed back into place. That looks good. And the front face I can clean with this sitting back in place. Let's get this in position. That should be fine. I'll put the screws back in place that hold all that together. I can gather the important ones up. 1, 2, 3. And the heads on these screws, I'm going to clean those first because I can see they're greasy. And that one looks a little bit of discoloration on there. I don't know whether that's been scratched or scraped. Might be a wear mark, or whether it's damaged in some fashion. And these I'll put back in position. Now that's their spring post, and that went there. if this mechanism here is sticky with grease, you may end up with odd problems with your shutter, like you might release the shutter and it might take a noticeable length of time before the action actually moves and completes. Which is okay if you're taking landscape photos and you're aware of the problem. There, see, look at that now. That just snaps back into place, no problem. That's because we've got rid of all the old sticky grease and other rubbish. And that's all there was to that. I'll put this ring back on the front of the camera, I suppose. It was held by 2 screws here. Camera just stopped there. I think it had file size limit. I was just saying I'll put these 2 screws back here. This little small chrome plated screw goes at the base here. This alloy piece here is the foot that allows you to sit the camera on a table and it would keep the camera level. It sits in here like that. It's fixed in with a single screw. I can tell I've reversed a couple of the screws because this one's clean and this one's got adhesive on it. I'll just clean that head off for good measure. Give that a wipe. Nobody will say anything about that. So, the pinion's the next thing to go back in here. So I'll clean up the pinion with naphtha and see about putting this back in position. So, what did we have? This round hard on its stop. And with the D over on that side, go on there. Whoops. It's held in position. The D was on that side. That was at about 45 degrees, something like that. The D was on that side. Which side of this had the screw head on it? That side, I think. I don't know whether that's going to pull on nicely or whether it's going to cause me grief. Get the screw started and we'll find out. Now that's not pulling down nicely. Let's try that pinion the other way up. One side might have more of a lead on it. Now it really doesn't want to go on there. Let's have a look. See if there's a problem. Is something distorted? Doesn't feel it. Doesn't want to go on that way. Does go on that way. Okay. So that pinion needs to be that way up. One of these jobs you need 3 hands for. Put that on my trusty all-purpose block of wood. Maybe things will stay where I've left them. And this pinion we know went on that way, and it went on without too much argument. Like that. I'm going to put the screw in, then I'm going to check my alignment, because I may have this a tooth or more out of position. I have. You can see that's pretty much straight up and down. It should be at 45 degrees. So that needs to come rotate round that way almost 40, 50, quite a considerable amount. Let's try it there. There aren't that many teeth on that pinion, so moving it one tooth or so at a time, you'll soon find out where it was meant to be. That's nearly it. I think I'm one tooth out. I think that needs to be clockwise one tooth. Try that. Yeah, that looks like it. I'll check that against my photo, but that looks exactly what I'd expect to see. So I'll just do that screw up tight. And let's see what this works like. It's still snappy in its action. See that? Even though we've got the pinion and everything connected, that moves nice and smoothly, just under the action of its return spring here. Right, at that stage, I can lubricate this with a bit of graphite powder. And basically I'm just putting some graphite powder in. I want it to go on the underside of this plate really, where it runs on that track. And the advantage of using graphite powder in a situation like that, providing everything is clean and dry when you start, is that you're not leaving a sticky film behind. It's not going to attract dust and dirt at a later date and become sticky and gooey and clog up like a grease would do. So that's my next trick. I'll just pop a bit of graphite powder in here. Whoops, just popped the spring off there, didn't mean to do that. That'll do nicely. Now I'll just go and blow that excess graphite out of there so it doesn't settle on everything. Looks much like it did when it came in, except this time we'll be getting rid of that excess graphite. Pop that spring back in. You'll see that's very snappy in its action now. That's what it should have been like to start off with, of course. Not that way it oozed slowly into alignment. Should have been like that. Well, that's good. I think I need to sort out the focus mount from the front at this stage. And this just needs to be disassembled and all of that nasty grease cleaned out. So I think that can go through the ultrasonic cleaner. I'll start reassembling the focus mount. That piece can go on first. That's just held in with 3 screws. Just got to make sure you get it the right way round. We'll get these 3 screws in position. Check that's sitting nicely, yeah, no problem there. I'll tighten those 3 screws up. Now I'm not going to put the helical grease on there at the moment. I'm just going to put that loosely in place. That's all clean and ready to go. At the back here, let's start putting this back together. We had our lever. Of course that had that washer underneath it. And there are 2 shoulder screws here. I don't think it makes any difference which one we use, so we'll just pick this one. Check that lever moves freely, it appears to. Nip that screw up, check it again. Yeah, that's moving nicely. We have our spring. This is held in place with the other shoulder screw. Making sure that spring sits around the shoulder on the screw, doesn't get trapped underneath the shoulder or anything. No, that looks good. And that spring has to hook into a little slot on the top of that arm, like that. So that arm is now spring loaded, and that would catch there. And this is where the pressure plate, the capping plate would come up, it would release that. Get this lever in position. This is always a bit of a bugger to wriggle this into place, but it will go without a fight if you're patient. Just checking that's on the right side of that lever. That's our shutter release. Releases the shutter on the shutter body itself. That looks good. That's good. And this lever here, of course, has its return spring. Sits in that recess there in the body. Typically here I want to wipe some molybdenum paste on there.